Welcome back to Book Talk. Today we'll be talking about a book called Sophie's World by Norwegian author Jostein Gaarder. If you haven't read Sophie's World, congratulations! You have successfully avoided reading one of the worst books I have ever had the displeasure to read. After taking the Titanic. And Wicked. So there is a girl named Sophie who starts getting letters addressed to her. They're from an anonymous sender who wants to teach her the history of philosophy. And that's pretty much the entire story. She eventually meets her philosophy teacher and they have their lessons in person. Weird things begin to happen after that. It starts off small with items appearing where they shouldn't be, but it escalates to baffling heights. I give Sophie's World 1 star. I'm willing to admit that the book started off okay. The philosophy lessons were interesting, to say the least. There were a few funny moments, and the mysterious aspect was enough to keep me guessing and wanting to find the answer. However, about halfway through the book, you receive a huge mind from the author. And even that I could have forgiven if it weren't for the unsatisfactory conclusion to everything. I know Gaarder's main goal was probably to write a history of philosophy in a way that would intrigue a younger audience, but it's still a novel. I like my novels to be wrapped up with no loose ends, so I'm not questioning all my life choices that led me to reading the book. If you read Sophie's World, then you'll understand what I'm saying. Or maybe you actually liked the book and I just didn't get the whole picture. For those of you who haven't read it, this book is about a 14-year-old girl, Sophie Amundsen, who comes home from school one day to find a letter in the mailbox addressed to her. Inside the envelope is a piece of paper with a question written on it. Who are you? This question seems to open the floodgates in her mind, and she's questioning the question, which I've come to learn is basically the only thing philosophy is about. Look, I've been a 14-year-old girl, and I can tell you with certainty that if someone asked me, who are you? My response would be, I'm Sam, who are you? And not, she had no idea. She was Sophie Amundsen, of course. But who was that? She had not really figured that out. What if she had been given a different name? Would she have been someone else? I'm sorry, I've never met a 14-year-old of any sex who was that deep, okay? That's something you grow into. She goes back to her mailbox and finds another mysterious letter. This time the question read, where does the world come from? The only thing that this question ever does to me is cause an existential crisis. That and what happens when we die instantly ruins my day. Sophie goes back to her mailbox a third time because the mailman actually shows up. And in the pile of mail for her mother is a postcard of a tropical beach. The stamp on it was Norwegian and postmarked UN Battalion. She thinks it might be from her father because he's in the battalion, but she doesn't recognize the handwriting. It's addressed to a Hilda Muller Nag, care of Sophie Amundsen. It's Hilda's father wishing her a happy 15th birthday, which is apparently exactly a month before Sophie's 15th birthday. The weird thing is that Sophie doesn't know any Hilda. After school the next day, Sophie goes back to her mailbox, hoping to find more mysterious letters. Instead, she finds a big brown manila envelope that contains the first part of a philosophy course she never signed up for. The lessons start out in ancient Greece with the pre-Socratics and covers the entire history up to Jean-Paul Sartre. It's actually pretty interesting, at least the older stuff. When he talks about certain periods of time, the philosophy teacher, who turns out to be a man named Alberto Knox, he'll give a little background into the beliefs of the time. Because to fully understand why these men held these opinions, you need to know what was commonly believed. So he talks about the Greek gods, and later he gives a brief overview of Judaism and Christianity, and finally he covers Darwinism. Earlier I said that weird things start happening. Sophie starts finding things that belong to Hilda, the first being a red silk scarf. Then, when she was learning about Socrates, Alberto sends a VHS tape, because it's the 90s, and it's him walking around in modern-day Athens. When he gets to the Acropolis, something weird happens. The buildings behind him start morphing back to how they would have looked in ancient Greece, and he actually talks to Socrates. I started thinking that maybe Alberto was a time traveler, but why would he just randomly decide to teach a young girl about philosophy? Never would have guessed what it really was, by the way. As the lessons go on, Sophie and Alberto finally meet in person, but then all their lessons follow the same pattern. Alberto talks about philosophy. Sophie says she has to be home at this time. Alberto talks some more, and finally Sophie notes the time and says she has to leave. Every single time. They also receive more postcards for Hilda. They start appearing in weird places, like inside an unpeeled banana. And even weirder than that, their lessons kept getting interrupted by Little Red Riding Hood, Aladdin, Alice in Wonderland, and so on. I just started wondering, why the hell am I even reading this? But I kept going. And when Sophie learns about the philosophy of George Berkeley, she and Alberto find out that, dun dun dun, they don't exist! They're characters in a book that was written by Albert Nag for his daughter's 15th birthday. The next chapters take place in the real world, where Hilda is reading the manuscript from her father. And as she's reading, she starts getting mad at her father for meddling in Sophie's life. But she's not even real. She's from her father's imagination and is most likely supposed to represent Hilda, since Alberto represents him. I'm almost 100% certain that the whole book in a book thing was done for philosophical purposes. I just don't know what it is. Finally, at the end of Sophie's world, the book in the book, not the actual book, Sophie and Alberto somehow manage to escape from their book into the real world. Except they're not on the same plane, so they can't interact with anything or anyone. They make their way to Hilda's home in Lillesand, Norway. There, they do absolutely nothing. What was the plan? Did they even have one? To top it off, we are constantly told that they can't interact with anything in the real world, but the actual book ends with Sophie untying the rowboat on the dock where Hilda is sitting with her father. And that's the end. That's literally how it ends, and I can't express how pissed off it made me. And that's that. If you're interested in learning about philosophy in a concise and easy way, then I definitely recommend Sophie's World. But if you don't give two shits about philosophy, then I would give it a miss. Thanks for watching. Join me next time when I'll be reviewing an adventure novel that features swashbuckling pirates and a hunt for buried treasure. I hope to see you there on Book Talk.